Bart's v. Anthropic has to be the silliest of the AI cases. Cadre v. Meta may be further along, which is why I've been focusing on it, but oh my god. See my video, it's called Claude AI Plaintiffs in Hysterics, where they were saying all sorts of crazy things like, or any teenager could tell you it's illegal, like that's some kind of big legal point. Or that AI companies were stealing the fire of Prometheus, even though Prometheus was the one who stole the fire. But yeah, they were just going through hysterics like that. So we're not going to go through all of this. I really just wanted to update you on it because I've got a couple of videos I want to do that are going to involve a whole lot more work to put into. And those of you who've been keeping up for the last few days know that I've been having to take care of my wife just because of a minor medical issue, but the hospital refused to give her the medicine for it. But she's got it from the urgent care now, so she's been resting. And so hopefully that'll be back to normal in a couple of days. And I can get to a lot of these videos I want. But this is going to be easy because we're not going to go over that much of it. We're just going to kind of laugh at more of the silly things that they're doing. And this is going to start over on page 20 of the PDF file. The page number at the bottom is 14, but again, I'm going to go with the PDF page numbers to make it easier for you to follow along. So apparently, I think we need to talk a little more about Texaco than we have in the past. Because I've kind of glossed over it because it has absolutely no relevance to it, but it's come up now in multiple cases, and so I think they're all going to be relying more heavily on it, which is dumb, as you're going to see. Because just going from how they themselves described it, Texaco subscribed to many scientific and technical journals, which it kept in a centralized library. When researchers wanted to access these journals, they would check them out from that library. Texaco, however, only paid for a few subscriptions. Its researchers would often photocopy articles in the entirety to have them available for later reference as needed. So the Second Circuit said that that wasn't fair use because it was institutional systemic copying, and it was done for the purpose of increasing the number of copies available while avoiding the necessity of paying for license fees or additional subscriptions. So that's what it was. It was just about direct copying. It has nothing to do with this. Nothing. And yet they keep bringing it up. But you can tell from their own words, from the way they describe it. It's like, okay, what does that have to do with this? And they're doing the same thing with wall data, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And here at the bottom of the page, they tell you the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department purchased 3,663 licenses to the plaintiff's software, but then went on to load that software onto 6,007 workstations. Okay, so you pay a license for this many, but then you install it on almost twice as many workstations. Okay, yeah, that's a violation of the license. What's it got to do with this case? What does it have to do with generative AI? Nothing. I mean, what they're going for is, oh, they used all these books, therefore they should have paid a license for them. But again, the use itself needs to be infringing. In both Texaco and in wall data, the use was infringing. In Texaco, they were making more copies than they had purchased, and in wall data, they put the software on more machines than they had bought a license for. And there's a lot of redacted stuff in here, and I have no idea why, because even the reason why it's redacted is itself redacted. I tried looking at the motions for that, and yeah, there's a lot of these weird black and yellow boxes there. But again, if you saw my previous video on Claude AI, they're going to make this same point that kind of debunks their own argument. Even training a single model requires creating a lot of copies. Raw copies, filtered copies, tokenized copies, and copies compressed in the training process. Yes, it can't be done without it. And as we covered, that argues to their point, not the plaintiffs. But it says when a commercial entity needs a lot of copies of a copyrighted work, it must pay for the copies it needs. But that depends on what they're using them for. The whole point of fair use is that you don't need that permission. You don't get any say if what they're doing is fair use. Not in any sense that has anything to do with this. And here we're going to say, we're not even saying the quiet part out loud. We're saying the out loud part out loud. Here, the infringing copies are the numerous copies of Plaintiffs' books Anthropic made to train its LLMs, like the photocopied journal articles in Texaco. Except Texaco was for human consumption. And as we saw in the last one, they were trying to use the fact that Anthropic was anthropomorphizing the model to make it say it's the same thing, but no. It's very clear. The law is very clear. The Copyright Office is very clear. An algorithm is not a human being. If something is ingested by an algorithm, that is not the same as a human being consuming it. So the question under Factor 1 is to whether the mere copying, just copying the books to train Claude is transformative. And they say it outright, using books to train LLMs is not a transformative use. Then what the hell is? I've made this point repeatedly. Alright, top of the next page, page 22, and this is going to, oh my god, how many times can they make this losing argument? This absolutely losing argument. LLM training is better understood as a sophisticated type of compression. No, it isn't. Not in any way, shape, or form. We've gone over how this stuff works. That's not how it works at all. LLMs train by compressing a version of the expression contained in their training data in their weights and biases. No. There is no data in there at all. There's no compression. There's no nothing. That is not even close to how the process happens. Which explains why they retain the ability to regurgitate that expression verbatim if prompted. Yeah, except they can't, can they? It's easy to see that. Try it yourself. If it can regurgitate something verbatim, it's only because it's in the training data a lot. But just your one book put into the training data, if no one else is quoting from your book, and no one else has passages from your book, it's not going to be able to regurgitate your book. It's probably not even going to know about it. It is also false that Anthropic used Plaintiffs' books for a fundamentally different purpose from the books themselves. Oh, here we go. According to Anthropic, books enable LLMs to write like human authors, answer technical questions like human experts, and give advice like human consultants. And the training process is what gives LLMs like Claude those abilities. Again, that factor does not mean a competing product. It means a full-on substitute for the product. We've been over that too. See, I have no idea why any of them think these arguments are going to work. Are they just that stupid? I don't know. So it talks about the other ones we've talked about a lot. Sega, Sony, they talk about Google v. Oracle. It says those cases are inapposite. Most of the cases involve computer code. So what? It's the same principle. In the only case so far to address whether AI training is fair use, the court emphasized this very distinction. Those cases are all about copying computer code. This case is not, and what case do you think it is? Thomson Reuters v. Ross. Again, that was not a generative AI. It was a different type of AI called a natural language processing system, NLP, which is a knowledge graph-based system. And that's fundamentally different from the transformers-based architecture that LLMs use. The only thing they have in common are the letters A and I. That's it. They don't work at all the same way. Thomson Reuters actually does have little compressed copies of things that it then regurgitates back. LLMs don't work that way. Thomson Reuters does not apply. Get over it. And yet that's the one they all do on social media when they're saying, no, see, the courts have already said, look, Thomson Reuters. It's like, you stupid. God, do you not understand any of this? Well, no, they don't, because they don't want to. Because that's not the point of this. Not only did those cases all involve computer code, they all involved mining the functional elements of that code rather than its expressive qualities. See Oracle. I mean, okay. Give it up for a ballsy move, I guess. Because in case you're not aware, the judge in this case, Judge William Alsop, is the very same judge who presided over Oracle v. Google. And if you remember, those of you who have been longtime listeners of my podcast, I covered this at the time. This is the judge who taught himself computer code so that he could understand what they were saying and what was going on and how things really were. And guess what? He found against Oracle, didn't he? He said it was perfectly fine for Google to make their own applications based on the same API. He was overturned in the circuit court because they were being a circus, but the Supreme Court overturned them. Now, the Supreme Court sadly did not look at the case of whether or not an API can be copyrighted because they're a bunch of wusses. And so we still don't have an answer on that. Logic says there's no possible way they could be. But what the Supreme Court said was that even if it were the case that APIs would be copyrighted, what Google did was absolutely 100% fair use. So, I mean, lying about the case straight to the face of the very same judge who rejected that exact argument. Okay, maybe it's not ballsy, maybe it's stupid. Maybe they are just stupid. But unlike Oracle, Sony, and Sega, where the expression was beside the point, here the expression is the entire point, but it's not the same expression that's coming from the books. That is the point. Oh, and we're doing more of the table pounding here, more of the things like we saw from the Bart's plaintiffs last time. LLMs mimic human writing by strip mining. Oh my God, horrible strip mining and compressing that expression. It doesn't compress anything. Even to the point of verbatim memorization. No, it doesn't. It doesn't memorize anything. And after a whole bunch of redacted stuff that I can't see it, so I can't respond to it, but they say Anthropic even admits memorization is a problem. Yeah, but that's not what they're talking about. The whole point of the LLM is not to regurgitate anything. It's to come up with something unique and new. That's the whole idea. Furthermore, the non-computer code cases they rely on, Google Books, we've talked about all these, Google Books, HathiTrust, Perfect 10, Arriba, are all inapposite as they involved a similar pattern of transformation. The defendants indexed creative works so that users could search for them more easily. And so now listen to their real distinction here as we scroll down. When users search the Google Books index, they are directed to links to buy the queried books, generating revenue for authors. They can only do it in ways that give us money. Anthropic, by contrast, offers no evidence that its exploitation, another one of those words, of plaintiffs' works promotes book sales, as was critical in Google Books. That was in no way critical in Google Books. That had nothing to do with it. It was the fact that what they were doing was fully transformative. Ultimately, Anthropic's whole argument collapses into its contention that use in training is transformative. When a use is transformative, Anthropic tells the court nothing else matters. Because that's what the courts have said for a century. I've gone over this one too, Nichols v. Universal. The Coens and Kellys had a similar plot to A.B.'s Irish Rose, but it was a different expression. It was transformative, so nothing else mattered. They didn't even have the other factors of fair use at this time. All of this predated those, and being transformative alone was enough to do it. They say that is not the case, but yes, it is. It absolutely is. Plaintiffs disagree that Anthropic's use of books in training is transformative, but even if it were transformative, that doesn't end the analysis. And what do you think they're pointing to? Warhol! Oh my God, Warhol. Again, the whole thing about Warhol was that the Prince photo was actually used as a direct substitute for the original. And so it wasn't transformative enough. Oh my God, Warhol. The Supreme Court really needs to do something about that. They really screwed the pooch on that one. Alright, so, you remember those 5 questions I talked about a couple of videos ago, I think it was, that the judge was asking, okay, is this an infringing use? Is this infringing? Is this infringing? Is this infringing? And they're pretty much yes or no questions. Yes, this is. No, this isn't. This is fine. This is infringing. Well, let's look at their attempts to answer these. Where the first one was, it's purchased at full price and read over 5 days. Each day he reloads the entire ebook. Plaintiffs assume that this purchase is from an authorized legitimate retailer. Plaintiffs assume that reloading the entire ebook refers to re-downloading it from the retailer, except that's not what it says. And in so doing, the person is not violating any of the ebook's digital rights management or license. He's not bypassing the DRM, even though the courts have said you can do that for personal use. If these hold, then the purchaser has violated neither copyright law nor any license. They're not actually answering the question. This is simple yes or no. You've got a guy who's bought a book and he's reading the book that he's purchased. That should be an overwhelming non-infringing. That shouldn't even be hesitating. You shouldn't need all these words for that. The fact that they're doing all this to try and talk around it and try to make it more nuanced than it really is, that tells you what they're up to. All right, case 2, he buys them from a notorious counterfeiter. Books are cheap. This is paid piracy. Okay, yes. Case 3, same as case 2, but his purpose throughout is to write a transformative parody of the work. And they say the initial acquisition from a counterfeiter is infringement. The purchaser's subsequent actions are irrelevant. There it is, right there. Fair use is destroyed. Fair use is completely and utterly demolished based on what they say. And again, they're pointing to Warhol. That's what they want. They want fair use to be destroyed, and they want to be able to grind you under the heel of the big publishing cartels. That's what they want. They want to make doing things like what I'm doing right now impossible. And they've done a lot of that since the DMCA came out. They've added on a lot of extra crap to try and do it. They're saying it right here, loud and clear. That's what they want. Case 4, same as case 3, but he writes the parody with co-writers. And they say the distribution to the co-writers for purpose of their common enterprise could also be an infringing act not excused by fair use. You see? The fact that they're using it jointly to write a parody, which is absolutely transformative, which is absolutely fair use, does not count. Which means there is no fair use. Because then you could just say, you're not allowed to do any parodies of my work, and you cut off parodies at the knees. Or going back to the film critic example, you're not allowed to use any of the clips from our movie. And then you can't do your movie review. Well, you can, but it's not going to be as effective because you can't show the clips you're talking about. So the only ones who could do the clips would be from the ones who review their movies favorably. That's it. That's complete and utter destruction of fair use. Case 5, he buys it, but then gives it to a writer who uses it to write a transformative parody. And they say if the gift involves making an unlicensed copy of the ebook, that will be an infringing act subject to a fair use analysis. That's not answering the question either. They're asking you what the result of the fair use analysis should be. Not that it's subject to it. They say the legality would depend on the outcome. The judge told you the outcome. Writing a transformative parody. See how they have to avoid the question? And then the last one here. Does it make any difference whether the work is purchased as an ebook or in print and then converted into digital format? Listen to what they say. This coda specifies that the physical book purchaser immediately converts the physical book to a digital format. That is a prima facie infringing act under the statute, and the digital copy is no longer subject to a first sale offense. There you go. 40 years of precedent, 40 years of consumer protections erased in a moment if they have their way. You buy something, you cannot transform it into another format, even for your own personal use. That's what they want, right from the horse's mouth. And I had a feeling the answers to these 5 questions will be pretty revealing. Not only in how they answered, but in how they avoided the answers. These should have been straightforward. These should have been straightforward. And they couldn't do it. And so I guess we'll have to see what Judge Alsop is going to do with this, because he knows that there are simple answers to these questions. He just wanted to see what they were going to do. So we'll have to see what he says to this. And as usual, I will keep you posted, and as far as I know, I'm the only one on YouTube who is, so please hit the subscribe button, and of course, comments for the comment God, shares for the share throne, and also give this video a like, and then please go to donate.bogosity.tv to keep me doing this. One-time donations of all levels are appreciated, even if it's a few pennies in crypto, or become a supporter, Patreon, subscribe to our Discord, get these videos early and ad-free, and join in on the live streams and the AMAs. Thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.